The day my son Jake graduated high school should have been perfect. 18 years of parenthood culminating in that proud moment watching him walk across the stage in his cap and gown. What I never expected was for my parents to use this celebration as their moment to announce they were redirecting his college fund to my nephew instead. The silence that fell over our backyard barbecue was deafening. That is until my husband Troy laughed and said those beautiful words that changed everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama gets your blood pumping. My name is Brady Wilson, a 38-year-old IT consultant living in the suburbs of Chicago. When people meet me now, they see a regular guy with a nice house and a stable career. What they do not know is that my journey to this point has been anything but conventional. I became a father when I was just 20, a sophomore in college with big dreams and little money. When Jake was born, my entire world shifted on its axis. Every decision I made from that moment forward was with his future in mind. My parents, Walter and Diane Wilson, reacted to my early fatherhood with a mixture of disappointment and reluctant support. They had mapped out a different life for me, one that involved law school, followed by joining my father at his firm. Having a baby at 20 was not part of their grand plan. Still, they stepped up initially, offering emotional support and occasionally helping with babysitting when I had exams. As years passed, their support came with increasingly visible strings attached. Any assistance was followed by unsolicited advice about how I should be raising Jake. They questioned everything from the schools I chose for him to the activities I enrolled him in. When I met Troy at a parent-teacher conference, when Jake was 3, my parents barely concealed their disapproval of our relationship, though they never directly addressed it. Despite the complicated family dynamics, Jake thrived. He inherited my analytical mind but none of my youthful recklessness. From elementary school through high school, he maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA. By junior year, he was captain of the debate team and had already started receiving letters from colleges across the country. His hard work paid off when he received a partial scholarship to the University of Michigan, where he planned to study computer engineering. The morning of Jake's graduation ceremony, I stood in our kitchen feeling a surge of emotions I could barely contain. Troy found me there staring at Jake's kindergarten, drawing still stuck to our refrigerator with magnets. He wrapped his arms around me from behind his chin, resting on my shoulder. 15 years since our first date, and I still cannot believe how lucky I am, he whispered. I turned in his embrace. Lucky I was a 23-year-old single dad with a mountain of student loans and a starter apartment the size of our current bathroom. Troy smiled. And I saw a man who would move mountains for his son. Still, the sexiest thing about you. The graduation ceremony itself was a blur of emotions. When Jake stepped up to the podium to deliver his valedictorian speech, I gripped Troy's hand so tight I worried I might break it. Jake spoke eloquently about the future awaiting his class, about embracing change and forging their own paths. Looking at my son in that moment, confident and articulate, I could not stop the tears that streamed down my face. Troy was equally emotional beside me, not bothering to wipe away his own tears. For weeks, Troy and I had been planning the perfect graduation celebration at our home. We transformed our backyard with strings of lights, blue and gold decorations, matching Jake's school colors and a custom banner congratulating him. Troy, an excellent cook, prepared Jake's favorite foods, while I handled the logistics of accommodating our extended family, many of whom would be traveling into town for the occasion. My parents confirmed they would attend, though they had been unusually distant in recent months. Every time I called to finalize details, they seemed distracted conversations, ending abruptly with vague excuses about other commitments. I chalked it up to their busy social schedule, never suspecting the real reason behind their strange behavior. The party was in full swing by 4 in the afternoon. Jake was surrounded by friends, cousins, and neighbors, accepting congratulations with a humility that made my heart swell. Troy was charming our guests as usual, refilling drinks and ensuring everyone had enough to eat. Everything was perfect until my parents arrived almost an hour late. They came through our back gate with my sister Amanda and her son Simon in tow. Simon, a year younger than Jake, had recently been accepted to Princeton University, a fact my parents had been mentioning in every conversation for months. As they approached, I noticed my father carrying an expensive bottle of champagne, a peace offering for their tardiness, perhaps. "There he is, the college boy," my father announced loudly, completely bypassing Jake, to clap Simon on the shoulder. "Princeton bound the first Ivy Leaguer in the family." Jake, overhearing this, simply smiled and walked over to greet them. "Hi, Grandpa, Grandma. Thanks for coming. Hi, Simon. Congrats on Princeton." My mother gave Jake a quick hug, then immediately turned to Simon. "Tell Brady about your scholarship, Simon." Full ride, practically. They recognized exceptional talent when they saw it. Throughout the next hour, my parents continued this pattern, speaking loudly about Simon's achievements while barely acknowledging Jake. Troy caught my eye across the yard, his expression conveying what I was feeling. Something was off. This went beyond their usual favoritism toward Amanda's family. As guests settled in for dinner at the tables we had arranged around the yard, I found myself reflecting on the college fund my parents had established for Jake when he was born. It had been their idea, a grandparent's prerogative, they called it. They insisted on managing it themselves, explaining that, with my father's investment experience, he could grow it faster than any standard college savings plan. Over the years, I had contributed regularly to this fund, sending checks that often stretched my budget as a young single father. Later, when Troy and I combined our finances, we continued these contributions together. My parents occasionally mentioned how the fund was growing nicely during family gatherings, but whenever I requested statements or details, they deflected with comments about trusting family and not needing paperwork between blood relations. I was pulled from these thoughts when my father stood up, tapping his glass with a spoon to gain everyone's attention. My mother stood beside him, her smile tight and artificial. The yard fell quiet, as everyone turned toward them expectantly. "We are so proud to be here celebrating Jake's graduation," my father began, raising his glass. "Education has always been paramount in the Wilson family." I smiled, relieved that he was finally acknowledging Jake's accomplishment. That relief was short-lived, which is why Diane and I have made an important decision regarding the college fund we established 18 years ago, he continued. "After careful consideration, we have decided that the money would be better utilized, supporting Simon's education at Princeton. As the fund trustees, we believe in investing where there is the most academic potential." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I stared at my father, certain I had misheard him. Around us, conversation stopped abruptly. Forks clattered against plates. Someone gasped. I turned to look at Jake, watching as all the color drained from his face. My son, who had worked tirelessly for years, who had earned every accomplishment through pure determination and intellect, sat perfectly still, his expression frozen in disbelief. "Walter, what exactly are you saying?" Troy asked, his voice unnaturally calm. My mother stepped forward, her chin raised defensively. "We are simply being practical. Simon was accepted to Princeton, an Ivy League school. Jake is going to a state university. It makes financial sense to allocate resources where they will have the greatest impact." I looked at my sister Amanda, expecting her to object to this blatant favoritism. But she stared at her plate, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Simon himself looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and shooting apologetic glances toward Jake. A wave of nausea hit me so forcefully I gripped the edge of the table. 18 years of contributions, of sacrificing extras so Jake would have a secure future, gone in a single announcement at what should have been his celebration. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat constricted with a mixture of rage and shock. Jake quietly excused himself from the table, murmuring something about needing a minute. I was torn between following him and confronting my parents. Before I could decide, Troy did something completely unexpected. He laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a bitter one. It was the genuine laugh of someone who had just heard an excellent joke. All eyes turned toward him. "That is funny," Troy said, setting down his napkin. "Because we moved that money last month." The silence that followed was absolute. My parents stared at Troy, then at me, confusion replacing their previous confidence. "What are you talking about?" my father demanded. I found my voice at last, Troy's calm confidence giving me strength. "We should continue this conversation inside." Turning to our guests, I added, "Please enjoy your dinner. We will be back shortly." As we moved into the kitchen, my mother grabbed my arm. "What does Troy mean?" "You move the money. You cannot touch that fund. We are the trustees." 1 month earlier, Troy had been helping Jake complete financial aid applications for college. When the forms asked for information about existing college funds, Troy realized we had never actually seen any documentation for the account my parents managed. He tried calling them for the details, but they deflected, saying they would handle the paperwork themselves. That evasiveness triggered Troy's suspicions. As a financial analyst, he knew the importance of transparency. Together, we hired an independent financial advisor to help locate the account. What we discovered was devastating. There was no substantial college fund. There was only a small account in Jake's name containing barely $5,000 despite 18 years of contributions that should have amounted to over $80,000. "Where is the money, Dad?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Where are all the contributions we have been making for 18 years? My father's face reddened. We had some temporary setbacks. Investments that did not perform as expected. We were going to replace it eventually." "You were borrowing from Jake's future." Troy translated, his voice ice cold. "For how long?" My mother sniffed dismissively. "Do not be so dramatic. What is family for, if not to help each other through difficult times? We needed to maintain certain appearances, certain club memberships. Social connections are investments too." "So, you have been using Jake's college money to pay for your country club membership?" I asked, incredulously. My father's expression hardened. "We made sacrifices for you. Your entire life, Brady. When you threw away your future by getting that girl pregnant, we stepped up. We have been carrying this family's reputation on our backs while you play house with Troy." The casual cruelty of his words stunned me into silence. All these years I had believed they had accepted Troy, accepted us. I had deluded myself into thinking they valued Jake as much as they did Simon. Our confrontation was interrupted when Jake entered the kitchen, his face solemn but composed. I heard everything he said quietly. My father turned to Jake, switching tactics immediately. "Jake, this is all a misunderstanding. Your father and Troy have made a terrible mistake. That money was being carefully managed for your future." Jake looked at him steadily. "Was it then? Where is it now?" "That is beside the point," my father blustered. "The point is they had no right to move anything. That fund is ours to manage as we see fit. We will take legal action if necessary." Troy stepped forward, pulling a folder from a kitchen drawer. "Actually, we have copies of the original agreement here. It specifies that the fund was established exclusively for Jake's education with you acting as trustees. By attempting to redirect it to Simon, you violated the terms of that agreement." "This is outrageous," my mother exclaimed. "You cannot just take control without consulting us." Actually came a new voice. "They can, and they did quite legally." Lisa Washington, my best friend since college, and a family attorney had been standing in the doorway. A guest at the party, she had followed us inside, concerned by what she had witnessed. "Based on what I just heard," she continued, "you have been misappropriating funds from a trust account. That is not just a family disagreement. That is potentially criminal misconduct." My father's face contorted with rage. "How dare you bring outsiders into a family matter? This is exactly why we wanted to redirect the fund to Simon. He respects family loyalty, unlike Jake, who has clearly been corrupted by your lifestyle." His words echoed through the kitchen, loud enough that guests in the backyard fell silent again. My father seemed to realize he had crossed a line he could not uncross. He grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. "We are leaving. This celebration is a farce anyway. Amanda, Simon, we are going." My sister, who had been hovering anxiously by the doorway, looked torn. "Dad, maybe we should stay and talk this through." "Now, Amanda," he barked. As they stormed out through the yard, my father continued shouting about ingratitude and betrayal, creating a spectacle that left our remaining guests in shocked silence. The door slammed with such force that one of the decorative frames fell from the wall glass, shattering across the entryway floor. After my parents' dramatic exit, an awkward silence hung over the backyard. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to acknowledge what they had just witnessed or pretend nothing had happened. Jake stood in the center of it all, shoulders squared and head high, despite the public humiliation his grandparents had just inflicted. It was Troy who broke the tension. He walked over to Jake, placed both hands on his shoulders, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Your future was never in jeopardy, not for a single moment." Jake looked confused. "But Grandpa said there was hardly anything left in the account." "That is true," I admitted, joining them. "But what your grandparents never knew is that Troy and I have been saving for your college education ourselves separately since the day we met." We never fully trusted their management. The tension in the yard began to dissolve as guests realized this story had a happier ending than they had feared. Our neighbor Phil raised his glass. To Jake and his amazing parents who know the true meaning of family, the toast broke the ice, and gradually the celebration resumed, albeit with a different energy. Friends approached us one by one, offering support and congratulations to Jake with renewed enthusiasm, as if determined to counter the negativity my parents had brought to the day. Later that evening, when most guests had departed, Jake found me sitting alone on the porch swing. "Dad, I need to tell you something," he said, sitting beside me. "I have suspected for years that Grandma and Grandpa only loved conditionally. The way they compared me to Simon, the way they treated you and Troy. I just never said anything, because I did not want to hurt you." I put my arm around his shoulders, marveling at his emotional intelligence. "When did you get so wise?" He leaned against me like he used to as a child. "I had good teachers." That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Troy found me in our bedroom staring blankly at the wall. The adrenaline of the confrontation had worn off, leaving me hollow with a grief I had not anticipated. Troy sat beside me on the bed, taking my hand in his. "I know you are devastated," he said softly. "I keep thinking about all the times I defended them to you," I replied. "All the times I made excuses for their behavior, convinced myself they had changed. How could I have been so blind?" Troy squeezed my hand. "You saw what you needed to see. You wanted them to be the parents you deserved." The following morning, texts began arriving from extended family members who had witnessed the scene. My cousin Rachel wrote, still in shock over what Uncle Walter did, "Here for you guys if you need anything." My Aunt Judith, my father's own sister, messaged, "Your parents were always status obsessed, but this crosses every line. So proud of how you handled it." Each message was a small balm to the raw wound of betrayal evidence, that others had seen the truth and stood with us. Jake remarkably seemed to be processing everything with a maturity beyond his years. He spent the morning helping clean up from the party, joking with Troy about how his graduation would definitely be remembered. "Not many kids can say their grandparents caused a scene worthy of a reality TV show," he quipped, while collecting fallen streamers from the lawn. A week after the graduation disaster, I attempted to reach out to my parents. I did not expect an apology, but I hoped for some acknowledgement, some path to reconciliation, if only for Jake's sake. Instead, I received a formal letter from their attorney, demanding the return of what they called their investment fund and threatening legal action if we did not comply immediately. Troy and I met with Lisa the following day, bringing all documentation related to the college fund. She reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing increasingly grave. "Brady, this goes beyond Jake's fund," she said finally. "Based on these documents, there is evidence they have been misusing funds from other family members as well. Your Aunt Martha's inheritance, for instance, which your father was supposed to be managing. I think they are in serious financial trouble." The revelation stunned me. How long had this been going on? How many others had they deceived while maintaining their facade of success and respectability? That evening, Jake found me in his bedroom, where I was helping him organize things for his upcoming move to college. "Dad, I want you to know something," he said, setting down the textbook he had been packing. "The money matters, obviously. College is expensive. But what matters more is what you and Troy did. You fought for me. You protected me. That is worth more than any dollar amount." His words pierced through the fog of betrayal and hurt that had enveloped me since the graduation. Looking at my son, I saw not just the child I had raised, but the man. He had become a man with integrity and emotional depth that far surpassed what I possessed at his age. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on my childhood, seeing it through a new lens. I recognized patterns. I had normalized the way my parents had always tied their affection to achievement and compliance. Financial manipulation had been their tool of choice, using money to control and punish when we failed to meet their expectations. 3 months later, we drove Jake to Ann Arbor to begin his college journey. As we helped him set up his dorm room, I felt the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that parents experience at this milestone. The shadow of the graduation incident had faded somewhat, though the wound remained tender. "You know you can call us anytime," Troy reminded Jake as we prepared to leave. "Day or night technical problems or emotional ones, we are always here." Jake hugged us both tightly. "I know, Dad. I have always known that." On the drive home, Troy reached across the console to take my hand. "He is going to be okay. We raised him right." "We did," I agreed, feeling a sense of peace despite everything. About 6 months after the graduation, my sister Amanda contacted me for the first time since that day. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes, her nervousness evident in the way she shredded her napkin while speaking. "I should have stood up to them at the graduation," she admitted. "I should have done it years ago. They have always played favorites, manipulated us with money. When I got divorced and needed help, they only offered it with strings attached." Simon has been feeling guilty about the whole college fund situation. He did not know anything about it until Dad announced it. Her apology was imperfect but sincere. As she spoke, I realized she too had been a victim of our parents' manipulation, albeit in different ways than I had been. Around that same time, we learned through family channels that my parents were facing legal troubles. Several relatives had discovered financial improprieties after what happened at Jake's graduation, prompted them to investigate their own arrangements with my father. The carefully constructed image of success and propriety my parents had maintained for decades was crumbling rapidly. When Lisa asked if we wanted to join the legal action against them, I declined. "I do not want their money," I told her. "I just want them out of our lives." It was a boundary I needed to establish, not out of vengeance, but self-preservation. Some relationships cannot be repaired, and recognizing that can be its own form of healing. A year after the graduation debacle, Jake completed his first year of college with excellent grades and a summer internship at a software company in Chicago, allowing him to live at home with us for 3 months. During that time, I continued my own healing journey through therapy, learning to prioritize the family Troy and I had created over the twisted definition of family loyalty my parents had tried to instill. Looking back on everything that happened, I realize now that true family has nothing to do with blood and everything to do with consistent love and respect. My parents offered the appearance of support while secretly undermining our future. Troy, who has no biological connection to Jake, fought fiercely to protect him without hesitation. That graduation day revealed harsh truths, but it also reinforced what matters most. We do not need to maintain relationships that cause harm simply because of shared DNA. The family we choose, the one we build through love and trust, that is the family worth fighting for. Jake is now halfway through his sophomore year, thriving academically and socially. He calls us twice a week, not out of obligation, but genuine desire to connect. When I hear the excitement in his voice as he describes his projects or new friendships, I know that despite my parents' betrayal, we succeeded in giving him the foundation he needed. As for my parents, I have not spoken to them since that day. Sometimes healing requires distance. I do not hate them. I understand now that they are products of their own upbringing, trapped in cycles of conditional love and materialism they cannot escape. I have forgiven them, not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind. The college fund drama turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to our family. It ripped away pretenses and forced us to confront painful truths. But it also showcased the strength of the bonds Troy, Jake, and I have built. Those bonds, tested under pressure, proved unbreakable. If you are dealing with toxic family dynamics or conditional love, remember that you have the power to create boundaries. You have the right to protect your children from the same pain you experienced. Breaking generational patterns is hard work, but the freedom on the other side is worth every difficult conversation, every painful realization. I would love to hear your experiences with family expectations and how you navigated them. Have you ever had to establish boundaries with relatives who confused control with love? Drop a comment below with your story. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family you create can heal the wounds left by the family you were born into.